From being literally homeless on the streets of Houston, Texas, to being one of the most clutch players of all time in the postseason to pop off and go to the finals, this is how and why Jimmy Butler, aka Jimmy Buckets, is Mr. Playoffs. Jimmy is a rare and special breed of basketball player. Even the most seasoned vets and superstars have had their moments in the spotlight where they tend to shrink. But not Jimmy Buckets. Oh no, not at all. Butler somehow raises his averages astronomically from the regular season to the postseason when he's required to have big moments, and he lives vicariously through those occasions in the playoffs. It isn't a secret how he does it. Everyone knows that he's just that good. What some fans may not realize, however, is how high his basketball IQ and instincts really are. So grab a couple cold ones, strap yourself in, and you might even need a helmet, because it's going to be a wild ride about how Jimmy Buckets became one of the most clutch ballers in playoff history. We're going to go over how he has sneaky footwork in the mid-range, his ability to analyze opponents and manipulate them on offense and defense, how he turns up the intensity of his game to dominate higher-seeded teams, and why the internet is crazy enough to say he might be Michael Jordan's illegitimate son. Oh yeah, and it probably would be good to go over his insane stat lines and postseason accolades in the last few years too. Unless you've been under a rock, or live on the underside of the imaginary flat earth, you may have heard through the grapevine that something incredible has been brewing in Miami for a little while now. While the Heat certainly has not been a terrible team since the Wade, Bosh, and LeBron era, they haven't had nearly as much breakout success as they have had in the past few years with Butler. The Heat were only 2 games removed from being champions before falling to the Lakers in 2020. And the wild card that year, other than COVID-19, was undoubtedly the sign and trade of Jimmy to the Heat. In 2019, right before Butler hit up South Beach, Miami didn't even make it to the playoffs at all and were under 500 for the season. The most surprising part of the success of Mr. Buckets is that he tends to just coast his way to the postseason year after year. His stats are certainly impressive for a star in the regular season, but he tends to fly well under the radar until the stakes get a little higher. Nobody knows except Jimmy for sure, but he may have learned this skill as a young kid when he was kicked out of his house when he was barely a teenager. He was born in 1989 in Houston, which happened to be one of the richest cities in all of Texas, so it's already an unlikely scenario. But unluckily for Butler, his father walked out on his family early in his life when he was only a baby. Then, when he was only 13 years old, he got the biggest shock of his life. His own mother decided to kick him out of the house out of nowhere with almost no warning. Her reasoning? "I don't like the look of you. You gotta go." That's about as ice cold as it gets. Jimmy would live with his friends, going from house to house every few weeks. That didn't mean he always had a place to sleep though. When he didn't have anywhere else to go, he would just wander the streets. Butler may not have even considered basketball if he had a comfortable bed outside of the hot Texas weather, because in an interview he stated that football was huge, and that was the sport he gravitated to as a kid. He only considered basketball when he decided to get some relief from the sun on the court where they had air conditioning. It was playing basketball where Jimmy found a new friend and ultimately a new family. While he was a senior in high school, he met freshman Jordan Leslie, and the two quickly bonded. Butler would end up staying at the Leslies despite some initial reluctance from Jordan's mother and stepfather. But after a few months, they took him in permanently. When it came time to graduate and go to college, despite being voted his high school's basketball MVP as a senior, Jimmy didn't make any waves among recruiters for top colleges and universities. So he planted his feet and attended Tyler Junior College in Texas. It was only during his freshman year there that he started to get some serious looks by having some otherworldly 30-plus point performances, and in 2008, he got an athletic scholarship from Marquette. He would end up foreshadowing his NBA career there by making some seriously clutch game winners versus UConn and St. John's to help Marquette get to an 11-7 record and a ticket to the NCAA tournament. At the end of his second year, he took what was a bit of a gamble at the time and decided to declare for the NBA draft in 2011. Name after name was called for every team except one, when at the very end of the first round, Buckets was called up by the Chicago Bulls. Jimmy was by no means extraordinary in his first year with Chicago. He played 42 games and averaged 2.6 points, 0.3 assists, and 1.3 rebounds in less than 9 minutes per game in a shortened lockout season. But his big break would come soon, because after Derrick Rose's unfortunate injury and the Bulls sliding back, he was given many more opportunities over the next few years. By only his 4th season in the league, he was averaging 20 points a game, up from only 13 the previous season. And he was awarded the title of the league's most improved player in 2014 to 2015, not to mention being named an All-Star and placed on the All-Defensive Second Team. That same year, we got the first hints of playoff buckets, because he would rise to the occasion and lead the Bulls to the East semifinals, despite losing to LeBron's Cavs in 6. He would continue to help Chicago get to the playoffs in 2017, but had an early exit against the Celtics. The next few years, Jimmy wouldn't really get a fair shake, at least not on paper. Buckets was labeled a locker room cancer by the media after criticizing the drive of the younger players on the Chicago squad, and soon after, he was traded to the Timberwolves. If playoff Jimmy wasn't obvious yet in the eyes of NBA fans, it should have at least been on their radar when he helped Minnesota get to the postseason after not being there for 14 years. The leaky drama faucet kept pouring out while he was with the Wolves, though. He was traded by mid-season in 2018, which may have been partly because of an incident where Butler says he beat the starters in a scrimmage and screamed at them, "You can't win without me." Turns out, he wasn't wrong. Minnesota went on a 3-year playoff drought after the trade that sent him to the 76ers. In Philly, Jimmy was turning it up again, but this time he was alongside Embiid and Ben Simmons. They would get to the Eastern Conference semifinals, but the 76ers wasn't a good fit for him either. After the buzzer beater by Kawhi in the battle against the Raptors to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, Butler said it seemed certain he would not be staying with the 76ers for the next season. Jimmy Butler would go on to be in a sign and trade to the Heat in 2020, and it was there that he finally found the culture he was looking for. He said that the coaching and front office in Miami were in win-now mode every year and weren't looking for extended timelines for rebuilding like previous teams he was a part of. Buckets was all about that life because he stated he doesn't know about tomorrow, and yesterday is done and over with, so he only has the now to worry about. His words definitely ring true, because that very same year he went straight to the finals with Miami in a show of absolute dominance. Jimmy averaged 26.2 points, 9.8 assists, and 8.3 rebounds per game in that series, but still fell to LeBron's Lakers in 6 games. He's continued to put up insane numbers in the postseason year after year. The craziest part about it is how clutch he really is when the postseason finally starts. During the regular season in 2023, he averaged 22.9 points, 5.3 assists, and 5.9 boards. But in the first and second rounds of the playoffs, his production has skyrocketed. Against the first-seeded Bucks, Jimmy put up a blistering 56 points in Game 4 and a jaw-dropping 42 in Game 5 to seal away the favorites to win the title. His continued performance in the postseason is clearly no fluke. Butler has an uncanny ability to shoot efficient mid-range jumpers by manipulating his defender with some tricky footwork that is almost Akeem-esque. Even with his volume, he still makes about 45% of these shots. His game is so fluid and natural in the mid-range that there are internet rumors that he may be the illegitimate son of Michael Jordan. Sure, it's mostly a joke, but the way he takes over the game and has a thirst for victory is very Jordan-esque. When it comes to the 3, he is maybe average beyond the arc in the regular season, but he turns into a clutch sniper when it counts, and he lets his opponents know it's his house when it really matters. On top of all that, Jimmy's defense is the real deal, and his excellent feel for the game allows him to intercept passing lanes like he's back in Texas playing football. Nobody will contend that Jimmy was a polarizing figure in the NBA before Miami, but there isn't a soul who watches his postseason play who will deny he's the ultimate wild card in 7 games. Buckets can take over the entire series like he's the main character in an anime, and there's no team in the league that's safe when he decides he's gonna turn it up.